And since I already have the mic in my hand, thank you, I'm going to ask the first question. You, David, John, your tour started on Thursday, right?
Right.
Could you tell me exactly what happened on Thursday at your first step, please?
The short answer is we were kicked out of a church in Compton. They didn't want to see the film. They originally said they wanted to see the film. The pastor, it was Zion Hill Baptist Church. The pastor is Seth Pickens. He wanted to see the film. He wanted to encourage the dialogue, but there were some folks in the church that didn't want to see that happen. So John actually was already in there getting set up with the projector with our tour manager, Caesar, and I wasn't there yet. And they were like, hey, we're in the church, everything's fine. And then a few minutes later, I get a text from Caesar, we just got booted. And I thought, like, did you park in the wrong place? What do you mean booted? Like booted, or like booted? You know, I didn't know what he was talking about. And then I start seeing selfies of them outside with all their crap on the side of the sidewalk in Compton. And so apparently these guys just kind of came in and verbally and aggressively forced them out of the church, even though it was planned and scheduled a month or so in advance. So afterwards, when I showed up, I was like, what door did you get kicked out of? They said that one, and that's the one I went in. And everybody was up front talking, and they were having an internal dialogue within the church leadership. They were arguing about whether or not to have this happen. And ultimately, the pastor told me personally that it was more about family than it was leadership. It was more about letting down his family, and they didn't want it to happen. They were not open to having the discussion, nor open to the ideas. And the pastor called me later and said, look, I told the guys, what if the film was called Have a Nice Day? Would that have changed your mind? You know, we can't shy away from this and say, John, you had a really good point last night about how you've been treated at these atheist groups. If you would talk to that for a second.
Yeah, I obviously, as you can tell from the movie, I speak my mind, whether it's going to get me in trouble or get me applause. Which, by the way, didn't you guys love my closing minute-and-a-half monologue? I mean, seriously. You don't have to answer.
It was good comedy. I mean, they were chuckling throughout.
I usually liked it. But so to the point. But so to the point to that, you know, Thursday night was, in my opinion, a black eye on Christianity, and we look horrible because of it, and I didn't want to shy away from that. And what I said last night, you know, we showed up at, I'm sorry, a venue in San Diego, I can't remember exactly, but you know, it was cold out, beautiful venue outside, but it was cold, and I had a t-shirt on, and they gave me a jacket, and they gave me a hot cup of coffee, and I'm thinking, and what I got from the Christians was a size 13. And that hurts, you know, that's horrible. It's a shame, and I have nothing else, no other way to put it other than, you know, score one for the atheist, or actually score three, because this is now our third atheist one.
Well, they're not done with you yet. These guys.
That's true.
You may take that point back.
Yeah, it might be 2-1, but we'll see at the end of this one.
No, it's 2-0. I mean, for this tour, you know, the Christianity scored the big goose egg, despite the fact that, in fairness, the pastor was humiliated, embarrassed, and it was no reflection of him or his personal ministry, but it was a reflection of his corporate ministry. And I actually was curious to ask Ryan real quick with that, being a former pastor, put yourself back to when you you know, were wholehearted in the Christian direction. Would that have happened? Or really, it's not even so much that. Why do you think that happens?
I mean, I was just sitting here thinking that most Christians live in an echo chamber of their own ideas. And one of the things that I'm sort of endlessly fascinated about with atheists is how well versed they are on a range of subjects, and are willing to say, look, I'm not a biologist, but from all the biologists I've talked to and the books I've read, here's what I understand. Most Christians haven't read any biology, you know, except when they were like freshmen in college, you know, was the last time they opened a biology book. So, including me, I mean, that was true for me as well. And so I think what happens is inside that echo chamber, lots of ideas about atheists and philosophy and science become distorted, and there's a deep fear. And Seth said to me, the pastor's name is Seth, he's a personal friend of mine, I'm the one who arranged to show the film there. Sorry about that.
I'm just glad you admitted that. I didn't want to tell him.
Yeah, I know. So he said, they were feeling like it's like bringing the devil into the church. And they didn't mean that you all are the devil, but the ideas are dangerous to their worldview, and that's what it feels like. I mean, I remember playing a U2 song in my worship service in Hollywood, and people thought that was bringing the world into the church or bringing the secular, things into the church. And, Bono's practically like a Christian. So I think there is this deep fear of anything that's not sanitized Christian coming into the sacred building. I was always of the feeling, though, I mean, probably not always, but in the last 10 or 12 years of my ministry, I always felt like if things were true, they could be exposed to scrutiny. And so we didn't have anything to, and if we showed the film and it was disturbing to our Christian congregation, well, then we better get back to work and figure some stuff out.
Yeah, to be fair, as we did the press release and posted it on Facebook, people started posting, this guy's been in trouble before for being too tolerant. He actually performed, was it a lesbian wedding?
Lesbian wedding, yeah.
He got in trouble there, and then, is it Black Skeptics?
Yeah, the leader of Black Skeptics, Sikivu Hutchinson, wrote a piece about
Right, and they actually showed up to one of his church services in support of him for being tolerant and supporting the LGBT movement. So he's been in trouble before. So when we did talk, just so you know, when we did talk and as we were hanging up, I can tell he's making these progressive steps and he's fighting with these elders in the church to try to make progress. I said, I just want you to know, have you heard of the Clergy Project? And he said, I explained it to him. He said, that's very comforting. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hopefully we can talk in the future. And that was it. So he did actually plan on being here today. He thought it was going to be an evening. I invited him to this. He thought it was going to be an evening thing. So he said yes. This morning he texted me, found out it was 11 a.m. And he's like, David, it's Sunday morning. Come on, I can't. I was like,
And he said, I'm preaching against
I was hoping you were going to forget, No.
he should.
Maybe he is.
There's a lot of questions. I think we should probably get started.
First question, and I will cut you off. And I touch the mic.
What's that?
He is serious.
Oh, don't touch the mic. Is that what you said? I'm sorry. Okay. Just a quick comment, and then I'll give you my main question, only because you were there at that atheist convention, and you said that at the end people hugged you and shook your hand, etc. It just made me reflect on the fact that Christianity is responsible for, burning how many hundreds of thousands of people or more, or the suffering, burning non-believers at the stake. But I never know of any situation where an atheist burned Christians at the stake. Okay, one thing, so you got respect there. You talked a lot about paradise.
Question.
You talked, do you literally believe in the existence of paradise as a physical location? And if so, given a universe in which hundreds of billions of galaxies containing hundreds of billions of stars and possibly multiverses, in which there's got to be trillions of other intelligent life forms, where is paradise? That's what I'm asking you. Where is it located?
I wish you stopped at just, do you believe in paradise? Because then I say yes. As soon as you go to the physical location, I go, So the best way I conceive of it, so this is one of those answers. I don't know. I have no clue. However, the one thing I will throw out there is I love the Through the Wormhole series, and they do a great one on parallel universes and dimensions. I'm sorry, not parallel universes, the dimensions, and how we know for a fact there's more than the 3 dimensions we have. And they go in, and yeah, exactly. So, sure, maybe it's on dimension number 6. I have no idea.
Yes, hi, John. I wanted to continue along the line of when you said if the resurrection could be disproven, what then would you see Jesus Christ as? Would he be a great teacher, a great philosopher, nobody special, or what?
C.S. Lewis had he's either liar, lunatic, or Lord, and now it's been added by the atheists or legend. But saying with any of those options, I would say, well, if that's the case, he wasn't a legend. He clearly wasn't a Lord. It leaves him either a liar or a lunatic.
No, he could be a legend in the positive sense. Like, he's a legend.
Yeah.
Right? He was an incredible...
But I guess when they say that, they're saying he didn't exist as in a legend.
Right, I gotcha.
But I would say he's not a good teacher because he clearly was delusional. He thought he was God, and he thought he had the control over death and life. So...
He was also
He's-
apocalyptic, and he was wrong about the apocalypse, about the end times, about the return.
No.
Yeah.
I know where you're going.
Do we
Matthew
have the same
24.
Bible? I mean,
He predicted that the Temple of Jerusalem will be destroyed, and it was destroyed. So he wasn't wrong.
Except that was written in after the fact.
Not
Okay.
at all.
Anyway.
Not at all. The entire New Testament, not only my opinion, but many scholars, all written before that destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD.
Well, but we just had a Zeke Piestrip on Dogma Debate, and I don't know if you guys listened to Is the fourth listener here, by the way?
There's a couple here.
Awesome. Nice to see you guys. So we just had Zeke Piestrip on, and he produced a film called Apocalypse Later, the Harold Camping story. And so definitely check that out. There are
He actually
multiple,
lives over here in Venice.
Yeah, I know. I planned on seeing him hopefully tomorrow before I leave, or later tonight, but because we haven't actually met in person. But there are several scholars in there that agree, Bible scholars that are Christians actually, that say Jesus was apocalyptic. Jesus was an apocalyptic preacher preaching the end times, and then they say, yeah, clearly he was wrong about that. But then they just default back, because then he says, well, how can you stay a Christian knowing Jesus was wrong? And he says, well, that was the man, that was the human in him being wrong. That wasn't the God in him speaking. And that's how they correlate that. So,
All right, well, if you're going to throw that stuff out there, you got to give me at least 10 seconds to say something
9,
to it. Yes, Jesus
8,
was an apocalyptic
7.
Preacher. What you're referring to is him claiming in Matthew 24 of his coming, and that those here would see his coming. Well, they did see his coming. His coming was exactly what he explains. The words he used was coming on the clouds, which you see in Daniel and Isaiah, which is the judgment. It is Christ who judged Israel for their non-belief, and that's why the temple was destroyed. So, yes, he was exactly right. The temple was destroyed and his judgment came. That wasn't about his second coming, by the way.
First of all, I really admire your willingness to have differences between you and that you stay grounded with that. I wanted to ask you, John, what you think about the possibility that religion is appealing because people are so uncomfortable with having no explanations, with death, and with their helplessness.
I absolutely agree with that. I think it's I think it's a crutch. I completely think it's a crutch, because it's for those who need crutches. It's for those who are sick. It's for those who need. I mean, this is what the New Testament shows repeatedly. Is the prideful ones, the ones who felt they could do it on their own, had no need for the Christ. It was the lame, the sick, the poor, the desperate. They needed Christ. So absolutely, I think it fills that void. But I think that's what I talked about in the movie. That's the condition of our human soul. Is I think we're all seeking, we're all wanting that better, that what I call paradise restored. Milton calls paradise restored.
I want to add something to that, because there's something I've never been able to ask you. I just never thought about it. But watching the film, I think for the 84th time, it came to me. A lot of times, and this is nothing to offend you, but it's just sort of an observation. When I watch our conversation at UNT, and I talk about my friend who had the daughter who was suffering from leukemia, I was talking from an angle of, this is why we don't believe there to be a loving God, right? I was talking factual. I was talking about that being evidence for the non-existence of a loving, powerful creator, that if it was loving and if it was powerful, it would have stopped the suffering. And you immediately go to, but what do you tell her? Because then it makes you feel good to be able to say something. So I want to know what your thoughts are on the fact that maybe you lean towards it because it feels good and it offers compassion as a solution, but that the fact that it makes you feel good has no bearing on whether or not it's true. And so as I talk about the facts of it not being true and the absence of that God, despite telling us he will watch over us, keep us from harm in Psalms 107 or 101, you tend to go to, what do you say to her? Well, I may not have the best thing to say to her, and I may have the best thing to say to her. There are humanist chaplains all over the world being trained on comforting people and talking about being sexy stardust and all these wonderful, exciting things about being a humanist. But you always go to, it makes us feel good. It offers something, but it offering something doesn't make it true. I want to know what you think about that.
You're wrong. I don't say it because it makes us feel good. That is a byproduct of it, obviously. If I'm correct, then it should make you feel good. The reason I say it is because that's what we're taught. That's the entirety of the Bible. You stop at chapter 27 and say, shit happens, it's horrible, bad God. you got to read to the end. You got to see how the story ends. And part of the story, the answer is that though you may suffer for a temporary time, there's a paradise and eternity waiting for those who want it, for those who want to be with God.
If we all suffered equally, I would say you have something there. But the fact that I'm just saying the fact that innocent 3-year-olds who have done nothing wrong go through horrible things, and then some jackass like me has a wonderful life. Like, it's not fair that I'm living this life and she lived that life, and we're going to have the same eternity. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not fair, and the Bible doesn't talk anything about fair.
Okay.
I got my ear on you, man.
Is there a way to go beyond rhetoric and approximate a multilateral platform for the development of common solutions?
Ryan, why don't you take that one?
I think Dogma Debate does that. I think we try to break through rhetoric and get through those commonalities. That's kind of what the show's built on.
The only reason why I mentioned Ryan take that, I wasn't being smart aleck about it, is because I think that's where what you're kind of looking for.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are a lot of issues that transcend the question of whether, the precise question of whether or not there's a God. I understand that people who believe that there's a God cause a lot of suffering in the world. There's a lot of people who don't believe in God who likewise cause a lot of suffering in the world for other reasons. So I think the question of whether there's suffering in the world is sort of a universal, like we all agree that the world is a difficult place to live in, especially for some people. And I think humanist-oriented Christians and Buddhists and Hindus and Sikhs and whoever, and humanist atheists can definitely find more interesting things to work on than the abstract question of whether there's a God. I think solving the God question, or not solving it, but addressing it, is important for some Christians to deal with and some atheists to deal with, because Christians who hold their faith in a particular type of way are adding to the problem. And in that sense, it's important to fight against that type of religion. But I also think that there's way more to be done than just simply endlessly circle around the question of, whether there's a being that none of us can see or have access to.
Quick announcement, the food is available if you're hungry. However, we're going to continue on with the questions.
This question is for all the panelists, but more specifically for Mr. Christy. Out of all the gods that we know, but specifically your God, Mr. Christy, does he force humans to follow other humans to find him?
No. That's an interesting question. Does he force humans to follow other...
In other words, how else would I find him?
Well, Paul says in Romans 1 that it's been made evident to us, whether you agree with this or not, according to God and Paul, it's been made evident to us through nature that God exists, through creation. And so that leads to many other implications as far as, well, what about those who never heard of Jesus? What about, my opinion is that God judges people based on they're accountable for what they know, basically. And I take that especially where I see it with the thief on the cross at Christ's crucifixion, who's next to him, who goes from one chapter of talking bad about him to all of a sudden he's rebuking the other thief, saying, leave him alone. This man is innocent. And he just turns to Jesus and says, remember me. He doesn't say, forgive me. He doesn't say anything. He just says, remember me. And Christ says, today you'll be with me in paradise. So I think it's just dependent upon our acknowledging of what that is, to whatever level our information is.
I think part of what the Protestant Reformation was about was saying, no, we all have direct access to God. That prior to that in the Catholic Church, you had to go through a priest and through rituals. And the Protestant Reformation was largely about saying individuals can have direct access to God through prayer and through Bible reading and meditation, that the Holy Spirit communicates with us each individually. I think practically speaking, most people still find access to God through their pastor or some other thing. I mean, I certainly experienced that as a pastor. It was one of the heaviest burdens of being a pastor was that people externalized their relationship with God onto me, so that if they had doubts, that was okay, because of course everyone has doubts, but I was not allowed to have doubts because I was the pastor. And the minute I suggested that I had questions and doubts, that shook the faith of 150 other people.
Thank you.
My question was like, well, why should that be true? Like, why should my question? First of all, why should I be any different than anybody else? And second of all, why should my insecurity about something that is profoundly insecure on the face of it shake the faith of someone who presumes to have a relationship with God directly? So I think there's a big inconsistency there, and I don't think it should be that. Protestantism is not about that.
I think you make a great point, because if it weren't for the early revelation, if it weren't for the Bible, if it weren't for all that, who would we know exist? Who would we know created us? And so when John in the movie talks about Genesis wasn't meant to tell us how creation happened, it was poetry to tell us who created. Why would we have needed that? That's what you're saying. He does force us to trust other humans who the Bible also tells us are sinners, right? So here are these people, you're all sinners, but trust each other to figure out who I am. It's very confusing, but God's not the author of confusion. Figure that out. I think that's why I'm an atheist. I don't know.
This is mainly for you, David. Is there any real conceptual difference between respecting a person's beliefs versus respecting the fact that those beliefs mean something to that person? So you respect that his beliefs are important to him and they mean the whole world to him, but do you respect those beliefs per se?
No, I don't respect the belief itself, but I understand that as an atheist, I separate myself from my ideology. I separate myself almost like a sports team, to where I say, yeah, I like this team, but if you hate that team, I'm not going to take it personally. But within group psychology, what we learn is that when you're a part of a group, that group, you tend to replace a piece of yourself with a piece of the group, such as ego. I mean, Freud talked about this in 1921. I quote Dr. David Eller in one of my talks that I give, where he's specifically talking about that ego, things like the ego. For example, at a football game, this is the example I gave last night in San Diego. At a football game, it'll be 12 degrees outside, but guys will have their shirts off with the team name painted across their chest. Well, they wouldn't do that in their front yard, right? But it's the group mentality of the stadium. The ego of the group is more important than the individual, so they will give up their warmth, they will give up their ego, they'll look silly, they'll be freezing cold for the betterment of the group. The same thing happens with religion. So I have to understand that while I'm able to separate my personality, my individualism, from my ideology, believers, I don't think, have done that. I think so many believers feel like they are their belief system. John says in the film, I am that religion. I would never say I am atheism, and you probably wouldn't either. But it's this concept that they haven't broken apart their ideology from themselves. And so when I talk to John, I don't say your ideas are dumb or I don't respect your ideas. I tell him I understand that your ideas are important to you, and I can validate that I understand how you feel about them, but I disagree with him, and I ask him, separate yourself from your ideology for a moment, and let's just talk about the concept, not about you as an individual. So I try, and I don't always succeed at this, but I try to avoid using direct attacking words like you and you always and speaking in absolutes.
I would question whether you actually can get that separation from your ideology. Anybody?
You don't think I have either?
Well, I don't know you well enough to know. I mean, I just don't know that that it's possible. That I think that we hold our ideas very closely. That doesn't mean we can't question and change those ideas. I think a measure of it is how quickly you feel you could change your ideas. A person who will readily adapt and change their ideas about things based on what they learn is a person who I think has a fair bit of distance from those ideas and can evaluate them. A person like Ken Ham, who at the end of the debate we all saw the other day, says nothing would change my mind, clearly has not had any separation at all. But I just think purely from a human perspective, we hold our ideas, when people threaten our ideas, we feel threatened. Just in general, I think. Some more so than others.
I mean, there may be some truth to that, but I'm saying just in general, that's one of the big changes I've noticed about myself. When I was a believer, I felt like I was the representative. I was Christianity. Right. And when I came out of it, I don't feel like I am atheism. Right. I feel like I can sit with another atheist, and like in the film, you hear I say something about, it's just a lack of a belief in any of the gods proposed. And then another atheist a few minutes later says, atheism is freedom. What? Someone else says, well, atheism is demanding proof for everything that No, that's more skepticism than it is atheism. So I can disagree with another atheist about what atheism actually means, and I don't take it personally because I'm not my ideology.
Yeah,
but when I see believers argue with one another, they feel personally attacked. And so I just try to keep that in mind whenever I am talking with them.
David and John, I want to applaud your respect, your continued sensitivity and respect toward each other. David, I wondered if maybe in the future you might, in discussions and in debates and on your show, you might want to bring up the fact that in the Bible, the chapter 1 Genesis and chapter 2 Genesis are actually two separate creation stories that differ with each other in the order of the creation of animals. But David, John, I wanted to ask you, if you believe in the Bible and the God of the Bible, then surely you must also believe that God had no interest in letting the ancient Egyptians know that he existed, or the Hindus or the Buddhists, and all the people who were in, the Native Americans who were in North and South America before Columbus. God evidently had no interest in letting them know that he existed. What do you say about that?
Yeah, this is what I was kind of addressing quickly before. I would say that we are judged on we're accountable for our information. So what I'm saying to that is, so I don't believe that, let's say, somebody living in, Middle America or something, Native Americans or someone in 42 AD, that none of the disciples had gotten to them, none of the disciples had told them about Jesus, that they're all just going to hell because they never heard of Jesus. This is a recurring theme you see through the Old Testament with non-Israelites being Old Testament-wise saved. People like Ruth, Rahab, people that had no right because Israel was God's chosen people. Ruth was a prostitute, and Rahab was a prostitute, and she was a Canaanite. And a woman, by the way. 3 huge marks against her, yet she's the one saved from Jericho. God saves people on their response to him with the amount of information that they have. So that's the best way I would explain that.
Just for the clarification, what do you think happened to the people 42 AD Native Americans?
I have no idea. What do you mean? What do I think?
Well, I mean, where do they go to heaven? Do they go to hell?
I think they'll be judged on their response to what their revelation of God is. What Paul talks about in Romans 1, that we all have a revelation through creation.
Yeah, that's basically the biblical.
I don't think they have to, again, back to the thief on the cross, I don't think they have to say, you, Lord Jesus Christ, are my Savior, who I've never even heard of. Because they've never heard of them.
There are Christians who believe that, though. There are Christians who believe that unless you have a personal knowledge of Jesus yourself, you will not be saved. But the inclusion is, there's a word for that, like those that have this inclusive view of salvation. Basically, people who do, what Paul says is, people who do right by what they know in their own conscience to be right are part of God's people.
Paul's point is, through creation and through our conscience, we have a level of understanding of God. If we respond to that, that can be salvation in and of itself.
My question to John is, what's God got to do with it anyway? I'll illustrate it by this.
Was that a Tina Turner song?
As a matter of fact, I can sing you the lyrics of it all the way through, but I'll illustrate it this way. 2,000 years ago, if you wanted your crops to grow, you asked the priest to bless the fields. Right. If you wanted to know about what was going on in the heavens, you asked the priest to interpret it, including such things as solar eclipses. If you wanted your marriage to go, you asked the priest to bless your marriage. These days, if you want to know about the heavens, you ask an astronomer. If you want your fields to grow, you ask an agronomist. And if you want your marriage to go, you ask a marriage therapist. The more that science has learned, the less the priests have to do. And I think ultimately it's going to be the case where the Emmett Kelly...
Question.
Again, I'll ask, what does God have to do with it?
Thank you.
Emmett Kelly...
Answer.
Okay.
Come on, man. We have other people.
So let me answer it this way.
Answer.
You're absolutely right with the priest things and all that, and we still do that today. You know, if you want to make $1,000, you give the televangelist $100 and you get it, and all that superstition's still in there. Science has not removed God. In fact, there are many scientists that would say that science has revealed more of God. Atheists Atheists like Albert Einstein said that the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. He used terms like, when we understand the universe, we'll then know the mind of God. I'm sorry, that was Stephen Hawking. My point is this, is you guys have this perspective that God and science are completely separate. Not at all. Science is how God is working. All you're doing is discovering the physicality of how God is causing things. You're not removing God from the picture at all. So that's my response.
You talk to him after. Talk to him afterwards. Talk to him afterwards. Talk to him afterwards. Talk to him afterwards. Yeah, thanks. Leave. All right, next. Oh, I hold the mic. I'm on one now.
Call me.
Whew. Okay, this is for anybody. I sort of believe that it's all done by humans, and we have, I don't know how many years, so many 20 or 50,000 years before the next ice age, but we probably have only 20 to 40 years to save the planet from global warming. So if you believe in an all-powerful God, then maybe he's going to save us from this, and we don't have to do anything. What's your comments on this? What is humanism and naturalism going to do about this? If do we need God in order to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of non-believers have this idea that if God exists, he's like the ultimate interventionist. I mean, I get this from a little bit from Richard Carrier as well, if some of you have read his book, Why I'm Not a Christian. And I think he makes some fantastic arguments in there, but it feels to me like he's over-making his argument. You don't need a God that intervenes at every single moment to question whether God should also intervene. I mean, I think Christians believe in a God that intervenes, but my answer to that when I was a Christian would have been to say, we cause global warming, we've got to fix it. Like, it's not God's job to save us from every stupid situation we get ourselves into.
Excuse me, Psalms 101:7 says, God will keep you from all harm, God will watch over you and protect you. So why would he say that and then let you run around bumping into
That's
stuff
the kind of thing
all the time?
pastors say to distraught people.
Well, let me just say,
is it true or not?
Do you realize you're quoting song lyrics?
Okay, but still, is it not
do
scripture?
Do you realize you're quoting song lyrics?
Is not all scripture God breathed?
Two parts.
But it doesn't
not only is it
he doesn't
song
breathe
lyrics,
songs, he just breathes the parts you agree with.
Not only is it song lyrics, you need to read that whole psalm, and what you'll find out is the audience he's talking to are those.
Okay,
we'll just go
I mean,
on.
I think
I can't. Well, because look, that's so convenient. It's like, look, is it a book of songs?
Okay, then here's the truth. Here's the truth. Okay, the Bible's completely wrong. Everything's to be taken 100% literal, and I'm now an atheist.
Round of applause.
Because that's the only argument. That's the only argument you're going to give me.
I did not see that coming.
On film, right?
I did not see that coming.
I'm done. I'm out.
If I try to explain anything, it's convenient. Yet, I get this all the time from the atheists in their argument.
But how are they supposed to know? This is the question that I have, and so I'm sort of metaphorically and like placed here in the middle of this conversation.
Yeah.
So how are they supposed to know which parts are metaphorical and which parts? Because when Christians explain inspiration, they say God breathed it. It's all, you can't just pick and choose. I mean, I've had Christians say to me, you can't just pick and choose the parts you like, and yet we all do it because, the guy who did my, like I'm doing Year Without God, and everybody compared me to him, what he did, A Year of Living Biblically. You remember that guy, A.J. Jacobs, and he tried to live literally by everything the Bible said. And of course, we all know it's impossible. And you and I would have said, agree with you that is not intended to be taken literally every single part of it. But the question is, how do you know?
And the easiest way to explain that is the same way you know when you're reading William Shakespeare, or you're reading Tina Turner's lyrics, or you're reading the Wall Street Journal, or you're reading Christopher Hitchens, or what we understand. We're intelligent beings. We can recognize literature. I do not read the Bible literally. I read it literarily. Okay, I understand.
But most people don't.
I understand when Paul is specifically speaking to a specific group of people about a specific event, that better match up historically. Because if it didn't, then it never happened.
Well, my argument
but I also
is,
understand
so when
Genesis says that God walked in the garden in the cool of the morning with Adam, that God does not have legs, and he did not walk around with Adam.
Or when Paul says women should not speak in church, was that just a specific, do you believe that's a specific situation that doesn't apply today?
Yes and no. Yes, it's a specific situation, but that letter specifically to Timothy is about, and we just had this discussion last night. My basic way to put it down as quick as I can is I'm a very strong supporter of women in ministry, okay? Women and men. I'm a strong supporter of anybody who takes the time to study, to show themselves approved, and then to teach. However, the culture you're dealing with was a culture where women did not learn, women did not have education, and they were not learning the scriptures, but yet they were speaking up and antagonizing, and Paul is dealing with that.
So if Paul were here today, he would not say the same thing.
No, Paul would say to a woman who studies and shows herself approved, God bless you, sister, and teach, because he did that with Priscilla, he did that with Phoebe, he did it with Dorcas, he did it with Junius.
See how this feels? I know. Conversation.
Here's the thing, John. The biggest difference between God and Tina Turner and all the other people that you mentioned is that...
That is a tweet right there.
That is good. Is that none of these other people, these writers, these poets, whatever, are supposed to be divine, all-knowing, all-loving beings. They also aren't expecting us to live our entire lives and depend and bet our eternity off of their song lyrics, okay? So whenever you talk about how egalitarian you are, I wonder, how are you more egalitarian than God?
That has, you're totally conflating several things into one. If you're talking about us being able to comprehend the message of the Bible, it's so basic that a 5-year-old can understand it, okay? That message of the Bible, what I say in the movie, that we have all sinned, and in the midst of our sin, Christ died for us for salvation. That's a very simple thing.
By the way, pick whatever slaves you want.
You want to get into now slaves? You want that?
Well, you can't say the Bible is simple.
On your salvation.
You can't say the Bible is simple when it's not.
Listen to what I'm saying.
Let's let David ask another question.
Yeah, this is actually our last question because I'm getting hungry.
So you talked about how God is revealed through science, but nothing in science requires faith. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it's true or it's not. But when it comes to God, it always seems to come down to you have to have faith. So why should I take faith in God when I don't have to take faith in science?
Yeah, okay, so this is going to be the last question to answer quick. Faith is the basis of trust, basically. I have reasons that I believe that point to this God, and I have understanding of those reasons that I trust this God. That's faith.
Quick bonus question.
As quick as I could with.
Maybe Ryan could answer this best. For a believer in Christ, what is the relevance of the Old Testament?
I mean, I would say the whole Bible, as I understood it, was a revelation of people's effort to relate to God. And so people are trying their best to relate to God. And the Old Testament is that record of the ancient Israelites trying to relate to God the best they knew how. And then what the New Testament teaches is that in the person of Jesus, some of the symbols of the Old Testament that were pointing forward found their fulfillment in Jesus, and therefore that those symbols were no longer needed because we had the actual thing. And so that's why most Christians disregard a large portion of the Old Testament, because it's sort of like it's like if you go to Plato's cave, if you have the shadow, and the Old Testament is kind of the shadow, then when you have the actual thing, you don't need the shadow anymore. This is a big problem for Jews, of course, because they don't like their religion referred to as a shadow. So it's... Yeah.
And also the Old Testament was very instrumental in sort of warning us or telling us that Jesus was coming or that a Messiah was coming, right? And so I think it would have been a lot more useful if it told us about, that Revelation was spending time working on where penicillin could be, pulled from, and cures for cancer, and that would have been a lot better.
It's an ancient Near Eastern tribal blood sacrifice religion.
Absolutely.
I mean, and they're trying. And what else could it have been? I mean, we can't expect it to be a modernistic, post-Enlightenment, rationalist movement. It just because none of that stuff existed.
And I think that points to the evidence of why it was written by humans, not inspired by anything divine.
They thought they were inspired by God.
There again,
the
you're
same way
conflating.
that, the same way that people who fly planes into buildings think that God tells them things, they felt that they were trying their best to get connected to what they sensed was outside of themselves. We all know that there's...
But they were also trying their best to control populations,
Of course.
oppress people, and have political power.
Of course.
As humans have always done. Inspiration is not the same as dictation. The Old Testament points forward to Christ. Everything about it points. Hi.
Is this communion? What is this, Italian communion?
This is Italian communion. Where's the wine is what
He's
I want to know.
on his knee.
We got to cut it
with
off.
a piece of pizza for John.
We got to cut it off, guys.
I want to tell John, we only have one piece of pizza left. Could you help us out?
Make some more.
I'm not Christ.
Your last
I'm not
name is
Christ.
close, though.
It is. It is. I can't.
Thank you guys so much for coming out. I definitely appreciate it. We all do.